morning. Wow, that was quick, quiet. Thank you very much. Welcome to A Call to Coaches. I'm Paul Kuharsky. I write for ESPN.com, and I spout off regularly from 12 to 3 on 104.5 The Zone here in Nashville, which is how I've wound up here in front of you today. Several months ago, Pat Shea, the CEO of the YWCA here in town, reached out to me and asked me to be part of this. The impetus for that was her husband, John, who has superb taste in radio station selection and was listening to my show on his way somewhere. And you remember the Miami Dolphins bullying case, for lack of a better term, where Richie Incognito was accused of making Jonathan Martin very uncomfortable to the point that Jonathan Martin left the Dolphins because he wasn't feeling comfortable in his workplace. And we had a caller to the show who wasn't, I didn't think, the brightest bulb, which is right in my wheelhouse generally for reacting to. And he wasn't alone, but he expressed something that a lot of people had been expressing with regard to Martin, that Martin was acting like a girl. And I'm not a feminist out on the front lines or anything like that, but I am a huge proponent of common sense, and one of the slogans we use on the show a lot is say what you mean and mean what you say. And so I kind of took pause with this guy and I said, that's really, in my eyes, a stupid insult. Excuse the frankness, but that's why I'm here. I said, it's a stupid insult. Like, do you have a mom? Do you have a sister? Are you married? Because I have a mom, and she's really tough, and I have a sister, and she's really tough, and I have a wife. I was in the room with her when she gave birth to our son, and I know firsthand that she's really tough, and not just in giving birth to Simon, but she's tougher than I am, generally speaking. So I think to insult Jonathan Martin as being like a girl is kind of a lazy insult, is what I told the guy. And John heard this and apparently called Pat in short order and suggested that she reach out to me, and she did, and I'm pleased to be here and I'm pleased to be a part of things, but I was reluctant because I don't necessarily always say the right thing, and there was probably a day where I called somebody a girl for not being tough, and I'm in the world of sports dealing with professional athletes and athletes and coaches and crazy fans who say crazy things, and I'm not a policeman like I was in this instance on any sort of regular basis. Nevertheless, after talking to Pat, I felt like it was important to sign up, and I started to think, you know, not just in terms of how I react to a call like that on the air, but in the subtle, dumb things I might say, or in the things I don't say, or that I let fly and I don't react to, that maybe in some small way I'm creating what Tony, in conversations I've had with him, call this fertile ground, where maybe in some small way I've tacitly endorsed something stupid that somebody ultimately decides to do in terms of raising a hand against a woman. So I realized that if I was invited to be part of a conversation, it's an important conversation for all of us to have about steering clear of that, and some subtle changes that aren't Tony pointing and poking us in the chest with the accusations, but just some subtle changes on things that we don't think about on a regular basis that can change the landscape in a big way and maybe have a bearing on changing some of these statistics that have been coming on this slideshow in front of us while we're waiting. So we will move on. That's my story. Now I'd like you to help me welcome a very big person in Nashville athletics and academics. David Williams II is Vice Chancellor for Athletics and University Affairs and the Athletic Director at Vanderbilt University, one of the longest job titles, I think, that exists in the city. David, I want to see a business card. I'll have to get out my reading glasses probably to see that one. You can't believe how big the print is on my notes here. He's positioned the program to be one of the most innovative in the nation. Long before he landed here, he spent a decade in Detroit as a public school teacher and coach, and certainly has interesting background from that life as compared to life down the street in West End. He's in a powerful position to influence athletic success and academic advancement for young men and women at a really fine institution. And I ask you to please welcome David Williams.
Thank you, and thank you, Paul. Welcome, everyone, to the first annual Call to Coaches. I'm really proud to be a part of this, and I just want to thank you all for coming out. You know, this is a very important first step. I want to thank the YWCA and Pat. This program is co-sponsored actually by Vanderbilt Athletics, Verizon, the Ohio Valley Conference, and I want to thank Beth, who I know here today, and the Stephen Turner Foundation. So I want to thank all of the sponsors, but more importantly, I want to thank you all for taking the time out of a morning, and I know you got a lot of things to do, but I think you'll find this very worthwhile. We're going to have a very interesting program, and we have assembled an amazing group of young men. I'll say young because I'm going to say I'm a young man, and they're all younger than me, so I'm going to make them young too. We got Boots Donnelly, Bernard Childress, Dave Loos, Delanie Walker, Chris Sanders, of course Paul, Tony Porter here, who is the head of Call Them In, and then my famous favorite football coach, Derek Mason, who will be here up here too. It's an impressive group. I know you're going to learn a lot from them and have a good time. Now, why are we here? And I think that's the important thing. This is an effort to try to right a wrong. And we have a problem. You know, in sports, it's kind of funny, as I sat there and as Paul referred to the statistics and I was reading them, you know, it's very interesting because those of us in the sports world, you know, we always want to be the best. And the best is generally measured by, you know, we're number one. I mean, Nashville just hosted the Final Four for women's basketball. And you had 4 teams that came in the race for number one. And Connecticut wins the national championship. They're number one. Notre Dame, I guess, is number 2. And so you always want to be number one. And you can't always be number one, but we got to be in that top 10. We got to be in that top 15. Well, there was a statistic that came across that board that we don't want to be at the top of that one. I mean, it's sad to read that Tennessee ranks 6th in the nation in women killed by men. That's not a place we want to be. That's not a place we need to be. And so we need to correct. That's a problem that we have to get after, that we need to correct. And the other statistic up there that was sort of terrifying is that, and Chief Anderson, Steve Anderson of our Metro Police is here, and thank you for being here, Chief. Chief has made it part of his priority, the protection of women and girls in Nashville. And his officers, he and his officers, answered over 26,000 calls of domestic violence, 1 every 20 minutes. So when you think about it, the time we're going to spend together today, Chief Anderson's officers will be answering between 6 to 10 calls of domestic violence. That's unacceptable. That's just unacceptable. And if you think back at it, organizations like the YWCA and other women's organizations have been working hard at this for years and years and years. But you know, the other sort of aspect, you know, when I sit around and talk with coaches like Coach Mason, you know, the essence of trying to get the job done is how you make something very, very simple. And simply, when you look at those statistics, what's the real problem in there? It's the men. I mean, when we talk about ranking 6th in the nation on men killing women, well, women can't solve that problem. Men have to solve that problem. We have to be the ones that solve that problem. And we have to start with our young boys. We have to start with our young boys. We have to teach them and get them to understand how important the respect of women, the respect of everybody is, and how things that they may have learned or heard or believe are important really aren't. That this is the important to solve this problem. And why coaches? Tony and I had a discussion on the phone the other day, and I said to Tony, Tony, if I think back to my days as a young chap, and if you were to ask me, who do you remember? Well, obviously, I remember my parents, and I remember all my family and the people that grew up around me. But when you ask me to think back to my K through 8 days, I can't remember the name of only one of my teachers, Miss Batts. And that's only because Miss Batts happened to have a son who ended up being a lawyer and practiced law with me. I wouldn't have remembered her other than years later when I was practicing law, a young man came up to me and he said, well, you know, my mother was your teacher. But I do remember Coach Williams, who was my Little League baseball coach. I mean, I can see his face now. Can't remember any of my teachers, but I remember my Little League baseball coach. Because for men, for boys, coaches are important. The other thing I shared with Tony is, for my youngest child who's a boy, I was both his father and his coach for a number of years, his 1st through 6th grade basketball team. And so I had the great luxury of being his dad and his coach. And sometimes that can be difficult. But the thing I remember so much about that is those kids on that team, who now, my son is a freshman in college, and those kids are now gone off and freshmen in college. And when one of them graduated last year from Hume Falls, he wrote me a note to thank me. Now, I really hadn't done anything with this young man since that 6th grade basketball. And he started it off by coach. So he still thought of me as coach, but he thought enough of me of writing a letter. Another one of the young men is at West Point now. And he came, he also didn't go to the high school where my son went, but he came to one of the track meets, and he came to me and he said, I'm trying to get into West Point. Would you write a letter of reference on my behalf? Once again, I hadn't had any involvement with him since that 1 through 6th grade coaching, but it was that aspect of being his coach that he felt was important to him and influenced him. And he wanted to reach out to me to help him as he moved on. So these young kids, these young men look up to you. They really do. And we have an obligation to basically right this wrong. We have a responsibility. It's not going to happen if we don't get involved with it. We can ignore it if we want. We can hope somebody else will solve it. But if men don't get involved in solving this, those statistics will stay the same, and that's unacceptable. So our job is to change the statistics. You know, we go right to the simplicity of it. We got to get to these young kids, and we got to basically teach them what's right. You know, Derek has been with us only a few months, and I love what Derek says in the first meeting he had with our team. He said something very, very interesting. He said, don't be that dude. Just don't be that dude. And that's the essence of it. We got to teach them, don't be that dude. Be something else. So I want to thank you for coming. Pat, I want to thank you again. I also got to take this opportunity. My wife is somewhere out there. Gail, where are you? I want to thank my dear wife, Gail. Well, as Paul said, you know, there's strong women, and Gail's one because Gail, well, let me tell you, if without Gail, I wouldn't be sitting right here, so thank you, Gail. And now I would like to introduce my good friend, the president of TSSAA, Bernard Childress. Bernard?
Thank you, Dr. Williams, and I also would just like to echo his sentiments and say I'm so thankful and honored to be here today. I appreciate the YWCA and their initiative and what we need to accomplish or strive to accomplish in our community. I stand before you today, first of all, as a man of faith, a husband, and a father of 2 girls who tell me quite often that I'm the reason why some of the guys that they've been around no longer are around. But it's simply put, when you have young ladies, I don't understand when I meet guys that have come and dated my daughters, I've simply said to them, you're gonna always know that I expect you to respect my daughter. And if, as long as you do that, you're not gonna have a problem with me. But if you disrespect them in any way whatsoever, and I know about it, you'll always have a problem with me. And some stayed, and some have left. I don't understand. The ones that left probably need to leave. I was asked by the YWCA to share their vision for our community. And that vision is of a community where all women and girls are safe and valued, because we have coached our boys and we've taught them to strive to grow up to be outstanding young men and be leaders in our community. At TSSAA, we know that athletic and the athletic field and the gymnasiums are classrooms which teaching is foremost in the development of character, ethics, integrity, sportsmanship, teamwork, all of the things that they have to grow up to be outstanding citizens in our communities. Above all, I feel like we gotta always teach our young men to respect themselves. They've got to learn to respect themselves first before they can respect other people. Although the athletic programs are normally associated with physical education and scholastic programs with mental education, one complements the other. What we always said at TSSAA is that we're about educational athletics. They're students first and they're athletes second. Your goal is to always strive, and everybody wants to win. Winning is important. If not, some say they wouldn't have a scoreboard. But we've got to teach these young men to be winners in life. And that's what I'm so proud that I had coaches growing up that taught me, yes, this is a game, but what we're trying to teach you is about life. These are all life lessons, and athletics help you enhance your education when it comes to life lessons and respect for others. There's a famous quote by Theodore Roosevelt that said, "To educate a man in mind and not in morals is to educate a menace to society." This saying certainly rings true in a century later. As I look around the room today in this theater, I do not see a room full of men who are part of the problem. But you got to understand, we're not completely a part of the solution, not yet. We've got work to do. We are supposed to be the good guys. That's why we're here. And I hope that you all hear what you want to hear and that you're here to learn more. I invite you to listen with an open mind and an open heart over the next hour and a half. I invite you to start thinking a little differently. Every day you have the opportunity to share and to shape a young man's life and to shape it with substance. You've got to seize the opportunity. One thing I always say to coaches is that, you know, you've heard people say that they do not want to be role models. I'm not a role model. You do not choose to be a role model, you're chosen. I want to encourage every one of you coaches and your mentors, anyone who mentors a young man, you got to understand that you can and you will make a difference in that young man's life. You can make a meaningful impact You're going to make a difference, and this is another thing that I've always said to coaches, you're going to make a difference in a young man's life. Whether it's positive or whether it's negative, the choice is yours. You've got to make that decision. Do not say that you're not a role model. Your profession makes you a role model. Some young man is watching every move that you make, and you got to make sure that you make the right decisions so that they can know the way to respect young women and be leaders in our community. I close with one thing. When I was a principal, one of my big pet peeves was, and still is, but I'm not a principal anymore, but I go to visit schools all across this state and the nation, you know, with what I do now, is young men with pants sagging. That's my pet peeve. I've always said, and when I was a principal, I said to those young men in my school, you're not coming in here like that. You're never going to walk the hallways of this school with your pants sagging because you don't respect yourself. And if you don't respect yourself, there's no way you can respect these young ladies in this building. Probably good that I got out of being a principal, because one of the things that I did that probably wouldn't go today was I went and bought some orange rope, and I took it down to my PE teacher. And every time a young man came into that building with his pants sagging, teachers knew, you sent him to me, he either wore the rope or went home. It didn't make a difference with me. And it was loud enough where everybody in the school could see it, and he had to put his shirt tail in for that day. But those are just the type things that I'm saying that we can teach young men to respect themselves. Then you're going to be able to teach them to respect young ladies. And we will be able to fulfill the vision that the YWCA has. I'm so excited to be a part of this effort, and I hope you are too. Again, thank you all so much for allowing TSSAA to be here, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks very much, Bernard. Now I'm pleased to introduce to you an educator, an activist, and a lecturer who's been working in the social justice arena across the U.S. and around the world. Tony Porter is the co-founder and co-director of A Call to Men, the next generation of manhood. He's worked for more than 2 decades to help communities and organizations, from colleges and universities to pro sports teams, promote healthy, respectful, and responsible manhood. I've had the opportunity to meet Tony on several occasions. The last time he was in town, he hustled over to the radio station from TSU, and we spent about 20 minutes with him on the air talking about this event and talking about some of the things he's going to talk about today. David Williams talked about how a lot of us remember our youth coaches so clearly. I think now, obviously, we're all adults, and there's still teaching moments maybe that stick out, and people that you remember from the conversations you had, or from the just one small piece of a message that he or she gives you. I think Tony is very much that kind of guy, and out of my short interactions with him, I feel he's memorable in a similar way. So the way David remembers Coach Williams, I think it was for him, which is an easy name for you to remember, right? I think a lot of us out of today are going to remember Tony in the same way. Before we welcome Tony, though, let's take a look at this video to get us ready for what he has to say.
I'm on. Am I live? so we're going to just get started. So they'll fix all of that and get it moving, and we'll go from there. So I'm Tony Porter with A Call to Men. Hello, everybody. Good to be here with you, and it was just great. I'm always excited when the men, women, and particularly men, you're going to only hear from men today. We're making it real clear that this is the work of men. And I'm particularly excited. I get excited when I hear men speak before me, and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. You know, I love following those conversations. I love storytelling also. I believe that's the way to be with men. We got it up. Can we play it? Let's play this, and then I'll come right back to you.
As men, we have unwritten rules and agreements, unnegotiated deals, and codes of silence that other men come to expect from us. This collectively defines many aspects of our manhood. I remember asking a 12-year-old boy, a football player, so how would you feel if your coach told you in front of all the other players that you're playing like a girl? I thought he would say I'd be mad, I'd be angry, I'd be sad, but no, the boy told me it would destroy me. I said, wow. If it would destroy him being told that he's playing like a girl, what are we as men teaching him about girls? If we continue to treat women and girls as if they are of less value, the property of men and sexual objects, we continue to maintain a culture that reinforces discrimination and abuse towards them.
It is important to rethink and reshape how we as men have been taught to act and behave. We need to hold on to the many wonderful aspects of manhood and remove those things that hold us back.
We need to stop laughing and begin challenging inappropriate comments made about women and girls. We need to educate ourselves, our sons, and other young men and boys. Let's be the solution.
Our liberation as men is directly tied to the liberation of women. A Call to Men works with men and women to create a world where all men and all boys are loving and respectful, and all women and girls are valued and safe.
Help us create a new world by being part of the next generation of manhood.
All right, cool. So that's a public service announcement that we share around the country with folks. And so again, I'm Tony Porter. I'm one of the co-founders of A Call to Men, along with Ted Bunch. I bring you his greetings. And our work is with men. Mr. Childress just mentioned that the men in this room represent the men we would define as good men, right? We're here as good men. He also mentioned that we're not part of the problem, meaning that we're not abusive men. And in essence, and in addition to that, he mentioned we're also not part of the solution, all right? Which is kind of, you know, it's a little contradiction there. Not part of the problem, but not part of the solution. Well, we got to figure that out. And through our talk, we'll, you know, and Paul mentioned about the idea, while we might not be perpetrating the violence, but we're part of that fertile ground that's required for the violence to exist. So we're going to begin having conversations, and I'm going to actually converse with you some. This is not a lecture. I don't do many of those. I like to have conversations with men. So I'm going to have a brief conversation with you, and then we're going to hear from the other men, you know, really giving ourselves an opportunity as men, as good men, as well-meaning men, as righteous men, for many of us, God-loving men, to really begin to think, if that's who we are, in this great city of yours, how do you have these statistics of men's violence against women? Where are we at? I talk with men. I'm a Christian man. I spend a lot of time in my church, part of a men's Sunday school class, and I have to be careful with how much I talk and when I talk so they don't shut me out, you know. I want them to listen to me. So in order to ensure that they continue to listen to me, I don't speak out about everything that I hear. And Lord, I hear a lot, right? But one of the things I do challenge them on, and they've heard it consistently from me, is when we as men attempt to separate ourselves from the previous generation of men, as if who they are, the challenges we see that they have, just kind of happen by osmosis, as if who they are has nothing to do with us. They come here as a blank slate. You know, okay, I love Motown and they love hip hop, but outside of that, the basic foundation of what they know about being a man, they learn from me. Now, I'm not in agreement with many of their babes. So even when Mr. Childress was talking about the red rope and the boys, but we don't all have that position. We don't all have a voice. As men, we tend to watch things more than we speak out and up for with things, you know? So our young men, and they need us in a desperate way. Most of the time when I talk to young men, I start out by apologizing to them. It kind of throws them off. You know, it's not what they expected. But I tell them, you know, most of who you are, you learn from me. So, you know, and many of my messages are subconscious messages. You know, many of my messages are rooted in tradition, and I'm just kind of on remote control and doing what I've been taught to do and not even realizing a lot of what I'm teaching you. And while I've taught you some wonderful, wonderful things about being a man, there's some aspects of manhood that I've also taught you, consciously or not, purposefully or not, that we have to rethink. So as older men, we see that as a way to be with younger men and to be with men within our generation. We believe that we have to come with love, you know. We believe that it's not an academic experience for men, it's how we be together. So I appreciate how the men that were at the podium before me immediately started telling stories and talking about experiences, because that's how you be with men, right? And give up yourself. If I want young men to be vulnerable and share and tell me what's going on, because I've taught them not to be vulnerable, first of all. So now if I want to reverse that and create that in them, well, I gotta bring it. I got to bring it to the table myself. So, as you know, the YWCA, a large part of their platform is their work is focused on ending violence against women and providing services for those who have been victimized. And they've partnered with us because they quickly grabbed a hold of the understanding that, well, if we're going to end violence against women, if we're going to get out in front of it, we can continue to react to it. We've been doing that for a long time, and we've gotten very good at doing that. Meaning, when I say good at doing that, I mean we have more services for women than we've ever had. When I say good at doing that, I mean we're holding more men accountable than we've ever held before. But while we've gotten good at it, the violence is not declining. So, we came to the point in our work, because many years ago I used to work with perpetrators of violence against women, but we came to a place in our work that if we really, the goal is not just to provide services and hold perpetrators accountable. The goal is to end violence. The goal is for the healing of women and the wholeness of women. The goal is for the healing of men and the wholeness of men. So if we want to do that, we got to get out in front of this thing. and the YWCA, they caught a hold of our vision, and we locked arms, and we've been working together in doing this. So this gathering here is not really focused on domestic violence as much as it's focused on healthy, respectful, responsible manhood. Knowing that healthy, respectful, responsible manhood is domestic and sexual violence prevention. So we're here as men to be with the men in this room in the presence of the women. That's the deal here for the next hour and some change or so, whatever we got left. We're here as men to be with the men in this room in the presence of women. We don't want to create another good old boy club. I don't know how many of them y'all got left in Nashville. I'm sure y'all got a few. We're not here to create another one. So we like doing our work in the presence of women. That doesn't mean that we don't gather as men and have our own conversations. Of course we do. But there are many conversations that we can have right in the presence of women. So this is one of the ones we want to have. All right? So what I want to do is spend a little time unpacking manhood, just a little bit of time unpacking some of what it means to be a man, what we're pouring into our boys, again, purposefully or not. Look a little bit at the consequences that's creating for many of our boys, all right, and then talk a little more about then what's our role as good men, all right? And we do have coaches in the room, but this is beyond coaches. This is about any man that's invested in spending time with boys, all right? That's coaching in of itself. If you look at the definition of coaching, it goes beyond sports. It's about how we mentor and how we be with people, and here we're talking about men with boys. So we're invested in all the men in the room, regardless of whether you're a coach. We are asking you to look. While you may hear things here, I've learned so much from my relationship with my younger son. I have 3 sons. My older sons, I was at a different place, right? I was at a different place. But with my younger son, I'm having an opportunity to pour into him and have experiences with him that are far different, far greater, and it's helping me to backtrack and be with my older sons in a way I wasn't. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that to say that as important as it is for our conversations here, you know, as dads and the relationships we're having with our sons, what's bigger than that for our time right now is how do we pour into boys beyond our sons? Go ahead, pour into your sons. We need to do that. But there's a greater responsibility for us as men. There's a gap that we need to fill. I'm not about though that we should fill it or it'd be nice that we fill it. There's a gap that we have to fill as men, meaning that we have to go beyond our biological sons when we're talking about these conversations. So this conversation we're having right now here, you may hear men make mention to their dads or whatever, but it's bigger than that. And that's dad and son relationships is not what we're focused on here today. Though we are focused on them and though they are very important, we're much more focused on our responsibility to boys in general. So let's unpack a little bit of when we talk about manhood. And when we talk about manhood, we like to call it the man box, how men are collectively taught to act and behave and be with each other. And a lot of the teaching that we received as older men, that our young men are also receiving, the reason why we want to talk a little bit about it, because it in itself creates this intense lack of interest that men are taught to have in women, outside of those they love and care for. I'll say that again. This socialization, we call it the collective socialization of manhood. That's our technical term, our nice, easy way of just, you know, when Dave Williams was talking about Coach Mason just simply saying to the players, don't be the one. With complicated situations, there's also a simplistic way to be with men and grab their ear. You know, there's a simplistic way to be with men. The work that we're talking about right now is not an academic experience. And I believe in academia and research. They help us a lot with what we're trying to accomplish here. But being with men in the way we're talking about is the heart. It's how we come with our heart and how we give of ourselves. It's not an academic experience. So, why was I saying that? So, when I heard Dave Williams talk about Coach Mason, you know, that simplicity of just don't be the one. That moved us from our technical name, Collective Socialization of Manhood, to a name we came up just simply calling it the man box. Because men can get with that, you know? Men can get with that and quickly grab a hold of that and have an understanding of that. So what we want to do is look at what's in that box, this collective socialization of manhood. And when I say collective, what I'm saying is that it's not that every man does all the same stuff, but every man does understand it. And many of us are struggling with different aspects of it. And this teaching of what it means to be a man has a direct correlation to men's violence against women. There's an intensity in the teaching of what it means to be a man that creates this separation from men and women, which is why it would be difficult for your son to have 5 girls that his friend, and he's not interested sexually in any of them. That's difficult for a boy. That's difficult. I know it to be a fact. I can remember my son, he's cutting the grass and tells me, Dad, can I go down the hill to Kate's house? Some of my friends are there. And I said, yeah, son, but you got to finish cutting the grass. He's about 12 years old at the time. I was only about 5 minutes from the house. And when I got to the house, all his friends had walked up the hill. So they're standing on the lawn. He's standing next to the lawnmower. He's looking at me. I'm looking at him. We communicate. Kendall and I have some deep conversation without saying a word, right? He's looking at me, and he's kind of saying, Dad, what do you want me to do? They came up the hill. I'm saying, yeah, I hear you, son. But check this out. His 5 friends that walked up the hill, they were all girls. So Kendall's standing at the lawnmower with 5 girls standing there. Now, when a man sees that, not you, not me, but a man, when a man sees that, sees his son and his son is standing there with 5 girls, what are some of the thoughts that goes through a man's mind? What would a man think? Not you, but a man. What is the thought that would go through his mind? Pride. Perhaps pride. And what will he be proud of? He got 5 girls standing by him. So why would that be something to be proud of there, Robert? Because he's a player. That's interesting. That's interesting that is what will go through our minds as men. Because check it out. Those 5 girls, there's folks that love those 5 girls. And in that moment, me as a man, I have just objectified 5 12-year-old girls and turned them all into sexual objects in that very moment. Did I mean that? No, I didn't mean that. But that's exactly what I did. Well, let's say he's not sexually interested in the 5 girls or any of the 5 girls. What then may go through a man's mind?
Might wonder why he's not hanging out with boys.
Might wonder why he's not hanging out with boys. And why would that then be a concern? He may be gay. Those are the places we go as men, to those 2 places. Either he's, and the question then that comes to men's minds in that scenario is simply, which one does he like? When we see the 5 girls, which one does he like? And as long as he likes one, all is good. Old school, we should say, cool in the gang. I know most of y'all young folks probably didn't know cool in the gang, but it's all cool in the gang, we used to say back in my neighborhood. I'm from the Bronx and Harlem. So as long as he just like one, and if he doesn't like any, we got a problem. So there's 2 messages there, 2 clear messages there. He either has to have a sexual interest in one, and if he doesn't, then something, and this is how we would say it, something's wrong with him, meaning he's possibly gay or leaning that way, questioning or whatever, and we define that as something wrong. We define that as something wrong. Not as, well, maybe he's gay. No, something wrong. So what we're saying in all of that is he doesn't have permission to be interested in the experience of girls without sexual conquest. Now, we didn't say all of that, but that's what we're saying. Early on, we separate boys, right? And we separate them in a way that speaks to, men are here and women are here. This whole thing around less value. You know what? Let me go through a couple of these points here and tie some of this stuff together. So we teach our boys about no fear, right, as men. We're not thinking we're teaching them that, but we are teaching them. We teach them no fear. I'll give you an example that we teach them no fear. How about you, sir? Do you ever get scared?
Not normally.
See, not normally does he get scared. That's interesting, that he doesn't get scared too often. Now, the things scare me all the time, all right? But he doesn't get scared. And when you do get scared, which is not too often, I'm hearing you say, how do you say I'm scared?
Don't mess up. You might have an accident. Pay attention.
Don't mess up. You might have an accident. Pay attention. What about just saying I'm scared?
Never crosses my mind.
Never crosses his mind. How about you, sir? You ever get scared? Every now and then. See, now, I can give you some examples probably where you got scared 3 times already today, but we don't connect with it as fear. We don't see it as fear, all right? We don't see it as fear. I got a phone call that was a wake-up call, but I was awake way before the call, and I thought it was Ashley in the lobby picking me up from the hotel, and I wasn't dressed and ready. I got scared. Now, would you have considered that getting scared? I got scared. I'm not ready. I'm scared. I got scared. Huh? Would you call, in that circumstance, you might say a little worried, a little concerned. But what was really going on, you were scared. But as men, we instill no fear in our boys in a whole host of ways. No fear. No. How many men in this room, when you get ready to get in the car, you get ready to hit the clicker to get in your car, you look in the back seat of the car, make sure nobody's in the back seat. If you do that on a regular basis and you're a man in this room, please raise your hand. I got one man here raise his hand kind of high. I got one only want me to know his hand is up. That's just between me and you, brother. I know I just done blew, I done peeped you out there, but I know that was, I apologize. I know that was about me and you. And I see another man over here raise his hand pretty high. They're the only 3 smart men in the room. The rest of us, we ain't doing that. But now, check this out. How many women in the room do that? Please raise your hand. And keep your hand up for a second, let the men look around the room. All right? A lot of women have, thank you, women. A lot of women have their hands raised because they're taught to do that. We're not taught to do that. What am I looking in the backseat of my car for? It's Tony Porter's car. Look in the backseat of my car, you got to be kidding me. All right, in the backseat of my car, they better cancel Christmas because, hey, it's on them. That's my attitude. Even though when I got out of that chair, I grunted a few minutes ago, but that's still my attitude. Look in the backseat of my car. But men, let's tell the truth. Driving down the street, look in the rearview mirror, and somebody in the back seat just sit up. Come on. Tell the truth. No fear. Gotta be kidding me. Don't use the word scared. You gotta be kidding me. I don't know. I'm not sure how it would go down. Probably simultaneously, I'll probably pass out and start peeing on myself at the same time. No fear. All right, but we pump this into our sons. We talk about athletics, the idea of no pain. Our boys don't understand emotional pain. When I talk to young men about pain, they don't know how to connect with emotional pain. We teach them, particularly in athletics, to be very conscious of whether or not to even tell us that they're hurt physically. All right? We teach them to steer away from telling us as much as they possibly can. We might not mean it, but that's what we teach them. When it comes to emotional pain, our boys don't understand emotional pain. We haven't really taught them that it's okay to explore emotions to understand emotional pains. Right? We have not taught them it's okay to explore emotion. Exploring emotion is how we define women. Is how we define women is what we define as being weak. Teach our boys to be tough, to be strong. All right? We define the opposite of being tough and strong as being weak. Collectively speaking, as men, we have been taught that women are weak. Men are strong, women are weak. And we're continuing to distance ourselves from the experience of women. That's so much of what's going on. Continuing to distance ourselves from the experience of women in our quest to define what it means to be a man, creating this environment while we don't perpetrate violence against women. We're part of the fertile ground for the men who do. And I appreciate when Dave Williams was talking about strength, because we got these rigid definitions of strength as men, right? It's all wrapped in muscles, our definition of strength. Because when we get much more comprehensive with our definition of strength, as Dave Williams mentioned, I know way more, and also Paul mentioned it, I know way more strong women than I know strong men. I know way more strong women than I know strong men. When we expand our definition of strength beyond muscles, right, what are some of the characteristics that we would define as related to strength? What would be related to strength, sir, when we move beyond muscles? How else would you define something being, something that's defined as strength? Yeah, and I don't think I'm saying it well enough. When we get beyond muscles, all right, in our definition of strength, how else can we be more comprehensive in that definition of strength? What would also be defined as strength? Mental toughness, tenacity. You with me now? What else would be defined as strength? Boldness. What would be defined as strength, sir? Being able to empower others. I appreciate you all. See, but we got this rigid definition of strength that works for us as men, So I'm in the car with my son Kendall and my daughter Jade. He's 16, she's 15. They're good kids. They're both athletes. They're both good students. And this is not that long ago, And I work hard at pouring this into my children. This is not that long ago, and, Jade is saying something about something. I didn't even catch all of that. I just caught when Kendall said to her, you need to grow a pair. I said, grow a pair. So I said, Kendall, grow a pair of what? Now, I got to tell you, with my older sons, I might have just let it go by. So a lot of what we're talking about as men is how we develop a voice. How do we develop a voice and begin to have these kind of conversations with young men? They will give us plenty of information, plenty of opportunities to intervene, all right, to help in their development. But so for the most part, we just glance over stuff and just kind of keep it moving. And I'm guilty of that. So when I come to men and have these conversations, I got to make myself transparent. I'm hoping that when I'm practicing what you've heard from the men and what you will hear from the other men will encourage you that it's okay to be transparent and tell on yourself. Talk about your own inconsistencies. Give of yourself for the development of others. That's what we're trying to do here. So yeah, he said, grow a pair. And I said, Kendall, grow a pair of what? He don't want to say nothing now. He said, Dad. Nah, man, tell me. Grow a pair of what? Now, Jade is hearing that, and she's starting to wiggle into that. That feels good. You know what I mean? She's just listening. She ain't got nothing to say. I'm just going to sit here and see how this thing plays out. Grow a pair of what, Kendall? You don't want to say nothing. So I said, I'm going to help you out, son. Did you mean balls? Right? Now, Jade is really starting to enjoy this. Are you telling her to grow a pair of balls? I said, why balls? What is so strong about balls? You pluck some balls with a finger and a man will drop to his knees. I made the mistake of when Jay was about 3 or 4 telling her just kick a boy in his balls. She would be playing with boys and they'd be like this the whole time. She'd be like just ready to let them have it. Tell me what is strong about balls. I have 6 kids, seen them all birthed in this world. I done seen a vagina do some stuff that balls ain't got nothing on. So I said to Kendall, we're going to change that up. This is where we're going. From now on, when you feel she's not as courageous as you think she should be, what we're going to say from now on is grow a vagina. Grow a vagina. And we get them with that all the time. Every now in the house, something say, Kendall, grow a vagina. I would not have known that, though, if I wasn't listening, if I wasn't paying attention. I would not have known how to be with him that way, how to be with other boys in that way. This how we as men wrap a lot in the muscles and use it to separate ourselves from the experience of women. We teach our boys no weakness. This whole thing around man up, be tough, be strong, be aggressive, be in charge. Now, a lot of it, we're just teaching what we know, what's been taught to us. We don't mean no harm. And everything ain't bad. But it's really important to us to think about what are we teaching that's tripping them up, holding them back from being full in their expression and their ability to be, and what are we teaching that has a correlation to men's violence against women? Be in charge, be a protector. You know, a man never tells his daughter when he's going on a trip or something like that, you're in charge. But men will tell their sons that all the time, right? And he ain't in charge of nothing. We know he ain't in charge of nothing. But it's just our quest to develop him into our definitions of what it means to be a man. And one day, the expectation is he will be in charge. But when we're telling a 5-year-old boy, you're in charge, and his mother's 30, you know, and he going to bed at 7:30, he ain't in charge of nothing. But the message in there is that one day he will be in charge. And that's our thinking. There are also subliminal messages in there that also say she's not in charge. She needs someone to be in charge. She needs to be taken care of. She can't take care of herself. It was done with me, and I had an older sister. So what was the messages she was also getting? You need a man to take care of you. You can't take care of you. We don't mean any of that as men. But I think we need to get off of remote control and really be a little more critical about what we're saying, what we're pouring in to our young men. No emotions, except anger, by the way, is the only emotion that we really give each other permission to express. But when you look at fear and pain down there, actually anger is a secondary emotion, always, 100% of the time, second to fear or pain. But we as men have not really been taught to understand fear and pain. We've been taught to deal with it as anger. Act like a man, no feelings, be courageous, be dominating. You know, these are all some of the messages that get poured in to our boys, that got poured into us as men. You know, make your own decisions, don't be gay. This man box is extremely homophobic. Now, gay men are very much gay men are very much men. And they struggle with a lot of the stuff that goes on in this box. But while they're struggling with it, they're not a welcome member to it. And they struggle, they tell me they struggle with that. We say that homophobia is the glue that keeps this box together. Don't act like a woman. Women are the property of men, basic tenet in how we're taught as men, that women belong to men, which is why you can complete this sentence for me. What goes on in this house? All right, that's a clear connection to a patriarchal society, a male-dominating society, and women and children as the property of men. We still tend to look at domestic violence as a private crime instead of a public crime, which is why in far too many communities, if I punch my wife in the mouth, I'm going to family court, which has an array of charges that end here. But if I punch your wife in the mouth, I'm going to criminal court, which has an array of charges that end here. Matter of fact, let me say that in a different way. If I punch my wife in the mouth, I'm going to family court, which has an array of charges that end here. But if you punch my wife in the mouth, you're going to criminal court that has an array of charges that end here. Same woman, same punch. It just really comes down to who punched her. All right? That's what it comes down to. Not the assault, but who perpetrated the assault. So we still, in many communities, while we know women are no longer the property of men, and we do know there's only a handful of 100 years or so ago that was true, it's still very much tolerated in our community. Women as objects, particularly sexual objects. So with all the glorious stuff about us as men, there's a lot of stuff that we need to rethink. We cannot just rest on our laurels and be okay with, men's violence against women being the leading cause of injury to women in the United States of America. That just can't be okay. It can't be okay. And these same notions of manhood that are creating this epidemic of violence against women is also holding us back as men. I want to talk with you a little bit about how it's holding us back as men. When you look at many of our boys today, our young men today, I spent a lot of time with them. One of their greatest concerns in life is don't be a sucker. We got some boys that 90% of their wake hours, and even in their dreams, is making sure that nobody sees them as a sucker. Fully invested in that. Work real, real hard at that. Not leaving much time for much else. And if you look at all that we've taught him, and then he becomes, his answer to that is, I ain't gonna be nobody sucker. Now, a lot of them don't say sucker. A lot of them say, I ain't gonna be nobody, the B word. I ain't gonna be nobody, y'all know the word. Which then comes, again, it teaches us how women are viewed in the midst of all of this, right? But if you're not gonna be anybody's sucker, that also then means that you can't be too vulnerable. Not being vulnerable means you can't take many risks, right? And risks then lend to the richest of our experiences by taking risks. But you can't be a sucker, which means you got to be tight. We know men who are tight. Our boys might not look as tight, but they're tight because they're solely invested in, not solely, but far too many of them are solely invested in don't be a sucker. That means don't be vulnerable. And if you're not going to be vulnerable, you got to always be in control. If you're going to always be in control, you can't ask for help. Check this out. I just want you to kind of hear it, how crazy it sounds, but how real it is. Men are taught to view that asking for help is a sign of weakness. That asking for help is a sign of weakness. When we hear ourselves, when you hear me say that out loud and you think about it, well, that don't make a lot of sense. But it's killing us and it's real. Asking for help is a sign of weakness. There's many men in this room right now. You got a little project, something you're putting together. There's the directions right there. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Use this screw, use that. Everything laid out. How many men in this room, you see yourself there, you got the product, you got the directions right there, and you still put it together and don't read the directions? If you're known to do that, can you please raise your hand? Come on, tell the truth. Yeah. And then you always have those 3 or 4 screws left over. You just put them in the garage in the extra screw jar. They don't belong to this project. They're just the extra screws they gave me in case I lost one. Asking for help, driving around. Now in the age of GPS, women started using GPS immediately. And most of them have a woman's voice, right? Men, it took us a while to get with that. I was like struggling with that. Get the GPS, man. Look, I don't need that. We driving around, you know, your wife, your partner, someone sitting next to you said, why don't you, just stop and ask for directions. You don't know what I got it. I know where I'm figuring it out. Turn the radio down. Tell everybody to be quiet so you can concentrate. Pass the same gas station 5 times, which means mathematically speaking that you are going in a circle. Still don't want to ask for help. All right? So it's ingrained in us in a lot of ways that we can laugh about it, but what I want you to think about is how it's tripping our young men up, this inability to ask for help. You're not going to be a sucker and be vulnerable and be in control. You definitely can't afford to be too nice. If you're too nice, how might you be viewed, sir? Pushover if you're too nice. How might you be viewed, sir, if you're too nice? Weak. We'll flip that right to being weak. Being too nice is being weak. And when we hear ourselves say it out loud, we then say to ourselves, this ain't good. But yeah, being too nice is a sign of weakness. Don't be too committed to almost anything. That's giving a whole lot of yourself. We're back in the area of vulnerability, giving a whole lot of yourself. How about this here? Don't be too loving. All right? Men, you can love your mother with all your heart and soul, your grandma with all your heart and soul, your daughter with all your heart and soul, your sister get a little bit of that. And then it starts going downhill from there, right? And as men, we don't teach our young men, really to share and talk about love. We don't talk out loud about love. All right? We don't really express love in an open way, right? How many men in this room drop dead crazy in love? If that's you, raise your hand. All right. Let me see them hands again. Who are you in love with, sir? My wife. Your wife? What's your wife's name? Aaron. Aaron? What do you love about Aaron? Huh? Everything. That's easy, everything. Give us 3 specific things about Aaron you love. Now I'm scared. Now you scared. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. You came right. All right. In another life, you might have said, I'm a little worried now. But no, you're scared. So come on. Tell us why you love Aaron like you do. Her caringness. Compassion. Come on, one more. She's pretty. All right. Now, John raised his hand. I don't know if y'all know it, but John is married to Pat. His hand went up quick. Bam! I'm not saying your hand went up quick, John, for anything other than the truth. Not because Pat is staring right at you. I don't think that didn't have nothing to do with it. But why do you love Pat the way you do?
I love Pat because her compassion is one thing, but her commitment and to try to bring people into her and engage. I get scared when I get calls from Pat because I know I'm going to be committed to some new venture. And when I heard about this call to coaches, I knew I had to be here today because it's something that's important. It's work that we have to do and change the dialogue.
All right. He loved the commitment in Pat. Who else raised their hand they in love? Now that you know what I'm doing, let's see who still has their nerve to raise their hand. Who you in love with? What's her name? Ariel? And what do you love about Ariel? I heard she's God-fearing, compassionate, and the other, I know she's an awesome woman. And that's good enough right there. Who you in love with? What's her name? Tracy. Tell us why you love Tracy. Godly woman. Beautiful inside and out. I like that one. She could live without me, but she chooses not to. We'll hear from one more man. You had your hand up, sir. Who you in love with? Your daughter? Tell us why. He's talking about his daughter who has tremendous integrity, her own person, won't no one push her around, including her dad. And we ask men on many occasions to envision the world you would want to see for your daughters. And how would you want to see men acting and behaving in that world? Again, our goal is to reach in and grab a man's heart. We believe that we can grab men's heart and ensure that they leave our presence thinking differently than they entered. We're on the road, to do the work here that we're trying to do. Now, if men spoke like these men spoke on a regular basis, if that's what our boys heard, that it wasn't like we had to create space and an atmosphere to do that. Men talk about love at a wedding, that's true, right? You're old like me, you just say, I do, all right? You're young like these men here, they have to go up there and read a poem or something, right? Times have changed, women demand more. All right? But the truth of the matter is, that's one of the only times that we would have to have an open public expression of love. God forbid she passed away before you. That might be another time. But all in between there, there's no requirement for us as men to publicly speak about the love we have for the women in our lives. And so our boys far too often don't hear that. They don't hear that. All right? So it becomes, don't be too loving, becomes something that they can really roll with, all right? Don't be too caring. All of this is the experience of far too many of our boys, all right? Let me go back there and let you see it one more time. And we're going to take a couple of minutes and talk about what we call the cycle of consequences that comes as a result of all of this. So we got these manhood files up there, which I just talked to you, I called them the man box, all right? Creates this secular experience for our boys, all right? I want you to walk through this with me. Now, you see the whole thing is coded in, don't ask for help, all right? So our boys start out with these definitions and notions of manhood that we just talked about, all right, which then teaches them don't be too vulnerable. Those of us who are educators and otherwise see how not being vulnerable leads to a lack of achievement, all right? A lack of achievement. A lack of achievement leads to low self-worth. And low self-worth leads to stagnation. Now, I want you to think about stagnation for a second. When you think about our young men and the word stagnation, what would be some examples of stagnation for our young men? When you think about what we're talking about here, sir, you think about stagnation. What would be an example of stagnation that we see in our young men? Lack of progression. Stagnation, sir. Drop out of school. Stagnation, sir. What might come up for you? Low-end jobs. Stagnation. No goal or direction in life. Many of our boys are stuck. Stuck with the inability to ask for help. Stuck with the inability to ask for help. And a lot of that we taught them. We tell our sons, go figure it out. Go figure it out is like a rites of passage. We keep our girls right here next to us, right? Real close, step-by-step process. And with our sons, it's almost like, we boot them out in a way like trial and error is like a ritual to become a man. I don't believe in that. I believe life in of itself is going to bring a share of that, but I don't believe my sons need to just go out and figure it out, because just go out and figure it out means go make a lot of mistakes. And many, many women bring their sons to us to help fill that gap. Women bring their sons to us, they don't know a doggone thing about sports. Somebody told her he can play. She needs a man in his life. I'm taking him over here to this rec league over here. Women bring their sons to us to help fill these gaps, right? I love sports, but it's way bigger than the X's and O's of a game. And a lot of time when you're coaching sports, because I've done my share of it, you find out a lot about families that you didn't expect you were going to find out. You know a whole lot about what's going on. You're like that pink elephant in the living room. You know a whole lot about what's going on in that family. You know what's happening. You know what this boy is experiencing. All right? We have a responsibility to fill that gap. Stagnation is, in many times, is a point where, because it happens to some boys very young, where a boy is even brought to us. He's already there. We're all going to experience trauma, but then there's excessive trauma. Trauma that just didn't have to go down that way. All right? The involvement with the criminal justice system. All right? The involvement with the criminal justice system. And here is only fair to say that in the United States of America, the criminal justice system, it plays heavily on race and class. All right? I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. Involvement with the criminal justice system. It plays heavily on race and class. We have 2 million people incarcerated in the United States of America. We used to be second to Russia. Now we are the #1 country for incarceration in the world. Over 50% of those are black men, somewhere around 30% are Latino men, the rest are white men, and the common denominator amongst all men are they're financially poor. When I first started doing work like this here, about 15 years ago, 1 out of 5 men would be involved in the criminal justice system, from an open court case to incarceration, probation, parole, some aspect. Now it's 1 out of 3, between the ages of 20 and 29. So I know a lot of folks are upset with the president about my brother's keeper effort, but what do? Do we just stand by? #1 cause of homicide for a black man in the United States of America between the age of 15 and 40 is homicide. Excuse me, #1 cause of death for a black man in the United States of America between the age of 15 and 40 is homicide at the hands of another black man. We don't talk about self-hate and its impact when we talk about issues of race and class. All right? So we're here talking about how to end men's violence against women, while at the same time we're talking about the healing and productive lives of men. And then while tied into this criminal justice system, our men wind up using those same notions of manhood to deal with all of this, which creates this secular experience, meaning that they're just going in circles. So what do we think about that? We think that we as men have to become interrupters of this secular experience. Prevent it from happening from Jump Street, be prepared to fill the gap and interrupt it. That's what we're here to talk about today. We interrupt it or prevent it. We're pouring into the lives of women because we're helping to prevent violence against women and creating this environment we want to see for women. And we're pouring into the lives of the young men that are having this experience. Dr. King, we're here in the state of Tennessee, so you all know a great deal about civil rights movement. But the Dr. King talked about the urgency of now. A major part of his platform was the urgency of now. I believe that applies to what we're talking about here today. the urgency of now. We have to fill these gaps. And that's why I'm saying it's beyond our sons. We have to pour this into our biological sons, but we have gaps to fill. We have responsibility as men to take. Women have taken a lot of this as far as they go. Women tell me all the time, he's about 12 years old, he's still nodding his head, he's still yesing me. I know he's respecting me, but it's almost like he's looking past me. Women tell me all the time, I don't think my son is listening to me anymore. Because remember, in this definitions of manhood, we have taught him to have less value in her because she's a woman. Women tell me all the time, he's not listening to me anymore. And unfortunately, far too many women cannot say, I'm going to have a talk with your father. That's unfortunate, but that's the truth. And I am so moved. I had that conversation I don't know, a few days back with Dave Williams when he talked about boys don't remember their teachers when they're men. They don't remember many teachers, but they remember their coaches. And I was talking to a neighbor about that just same day I came out yesterday morning, talking to one of my neighbors and sharing that story. And it's profound to me. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to share it around the country. I'm going to share it in my experiences around the world. That we don't remember a lot of people, but boys remember their coaches. I like to ask men to envision, particularly, many of us, most of us love sports. Not all, but a lot of us. You know, that picture where you got the team after a game or practice and you got 40 boys or so and they're all on one knee. The coach is standing in the middle of the circle. Y'all know that visual, right? They're all looking up at him. At that moment, he's more important than their mama. He's more important than their daddy. And even in that moment, for many of them, he's more important than God. He is the most important person to them at that moment. He has their undivided attention. They are hanging on to his every word. What a wonderful time to talk about something other than football. Right? Y'all with me on that? What a wonderful time to talk about something other than football. So my friend Dwight is a former NFL player with Miami Dolphins. He was a linebacker. He now works with the NFL Player Engagement Department. We're actually hosting an event just like this in Minneapolis on May 9th, and he'll be there with me. So I was at the last rookie symposium, 2013. Delanie Walker, who's with us, he was there as well. And they gave out these books, little memo books. And this was written on the book. And I had asked the way, I said, who wrote that quote? I Googled it, I couldn't find it. He said, I don't know, but I love it. He said, I have it in my signature block on my email address, so I just asked him to put it on the cover of the books. And I love that. It's how you live when nobody's calling the plays that really counts. We as coaches got to pour this into our young boys. It's how you live, when no one calling the plays that really counts. It's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're on a back road, no cars, nowhere around, and you come to a stop sign. Do you stop? Or do you just go through it? Do you stop? Or do you just go through it? It's how you live when nobody's calling the plays that really counts. So just in closing, because I'm out of time, some of the things that we need to really begin to talk to boys about. Get okay with ourselves and share with boys, how we begin to be with boys. So that's what we're talking about here. We're going to be moving to a panel discussion with the men to further this conversation, all right? So I'm going to ask Paul to come back up and we'll continue forward.
Thanks, Tony. As he discussed, coaches and mentors are in a unique position. As role models, they have teams of boys and young men who look up to them, literally, in the image that he left us with there in the middle of the circle. I'd like to introduce 4 men who have tremendous influence, impact, and reach in our community. Many of them have worked for decades in the field Others are getting ready to make their biggest mark now. It's a good mix. It's young and not so young. They've worked in the public sector and in the private sector. They've got experience and influence in the college ranks or the pro ranks. And we start with Boots Donnelly. Boots was inducted in the College Football Hall of Fame last year. He's in the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame since 1997. The Middle Tennessee Blue Raider Hall of Fame inducted him in 1993. He's a Middle Tennessee graduate. He returned to his college alma mater in 1979 and led Middle to 4 OVC football championships. He served as MTSU's athletic director from 2001 to 2005, and he is now the head of Backfield in Motion, Boots Donnelly. Dave Loos is the men's basketball coach and former athletic director at Austin Peay State University. He was inducted, we got Hall of Fame galore on these resumes. Dave was inducted into the Austin Peay Athletics Hall of Fame in 2008. In 2009, he became the Ohio Valley Conference's all-time wins leader, and he's the only coach in the conference history of the OVC to be named Coach of the Year 5 times. Dave Loos. Derek Mason was regarded as one of the nation's top coordinators while he organized the defense at Stanford, and he's the new head football coach of the Vanderbilt Commodores. And as associate head coach for the Cardinal, he helped the school achieve one of the nation's best graduation rates, 95%, I believe it was. While he worked in Palo Alto, the Cardinal played in 2 Rose Bowls, which is the pinnacle for a Pac-12 team. And we're expecting him to pick up where he left off and lead Vanderbilt to some great things, working just down the street. Derek Mason. Delanie Walker was part of a giant free agent class for the Titans last year. He came here from San Francisco, where he was part of the NFC champion 49ers and played in the Super Bowl before this most recent one. He was second on the Titans in his first year here with 60 catches, coming up, I think, just short of his stated goal of 70, which we all thought was enormously high, and he quieted us down. He had 6 touchdown catches, which was the most on the team, and he quickly became immensely popular with guys like me and Jim Wyatt, who I see up there, because he is outspoken, candid, accountable, and unafraid. I thought of him actually when I saw some of that stuff about fear. He'll be an even bigger factor for the team this year because Ken Wisenhunt, the new coach, is a former tight end. Delanie Walker.
How y'all men doing? Good? Well, I'm honored to be in your presence. I've had an opportunity to talk with all of you over the phone, get to know each other a little bit before this time, and I was sharing with Pat and Michelle that I was just really excited. I get excited when I'm talking to men who, you know, have this kind of investment, you know, and can talk about it and can talk about, you know, themselves and the experiences they've had as a young man and how, you know, pouring into the lives of men is important to them. How about we take a moment? I'm not that big of a fan of a panel discussion, your turn, your turn, your turn, and that kind of stuff. I like discussions. But I do want to take a moment to ask you a question. Can you just tell us, and we'll be responsible in share time so we can have as much of a conversation with you as we can. But I do want to ask each of you, can you talk about a man, share with us, so the men here, the job of the men in this panel really is, you know, really to to help further engage the men in this room about the importance of pouring into the lives of boys. So can you take a moment to share just briefly about a man who poured into your life? And I'm real purposeful in asking about a man other than your dad. And anybody wants to go first can.
Let me go back quite a few years to my grammar school football coach. I know Dave's name's been mentioned here, but he could remember his coach. I basically grew up without a father. And the first person that influenced me, I go all the way back to Little League baseball. I can still remember Bob Pugh's name, and that's been about 20 years ago when I played Little League. Then it went from my Little League baseball coach to my grammar school football coach. And so many people here will probably remember a gentleman by the name of John Siegenthaler, who became the editor of the Tennessean and the editor of the USA Today. He was my grammar school football coach. And probably without these two guys in my life, I probably would not be here. I had a tremendous tendency to head out on Charlotte to Tennessee State Prison, except these two guys kept me directed. And then I was fortunate enough to go to a private high school, Father Ryan High School, where Louis Cadnany, my high school coach, taught me and kept me on the right path. So I was very, very fortunate there. And when you speak of father and you speak of this, so many people grow up without a father. But unfortunately, in this day and time, everybody uses it as an excuse that they can't make it. And this young man did this, or this young man did that, because he grew up without a father. And that's all really a bunch of bull. There's no such thing. If you got the right people to direct you, and if you ask the right questions and ask for help, then everybody has an opportunity to make it. But without those two gentlemen, then I probably wouldn't be here.
Thank you.
Myself, I grew up in a single-parent home, just my mother. And I played football since I was 8 years old, but I can remember I was 12 and I played junior midgets, and a coach goes by Glenn Harris. Had a big impact on my life. His son played football on our team as well. He was the quarterback, but he treated everybody as equal if they were his son. And he always taught us to be responsible, consistent, and reliable. And then people can count on you. And I looked at that because I never had a man that was in my household that had them examples, and he had that. He picked up me and my brother from home and took us to practice and fed us and took us back home. And I looked at that as being a man. That is someone who cares about other people, because he also had his kids on the team, but he treated everybody the same way. If we were hungry and we needed food after practice, he made sure we ate. He took us to church, and he took us to games. And I can always remember him, and it goes back to what Mr. Williams said about, I cannot remember none of my teachers, none of them. And I spent countless hours in their classroom, and I can't tell you one thing they taught me or even tell you their name. But I can tell you these coaches, things they done and taught me to become a better man.
Just thinking back a little bit, the man who probably influenced me the most was probably a gentleman by the name of Dr. Moody Jackson. I also grew up in a single-parent home. Parents divorced when I was 5, and that process was a tough process. And I will say this, for coaches in here, you're all blackboard teachers, because everything that you do and everything you say, you write on that blackboard. But to move it forward, Dr. Moody Jackson coached me and his son when we were both in the 7th grade. Great coach, great man. At the time, he was just a PE coach. Well, fast forward a couple of years, he also became my high school coach. Okay, and Dr. Moody Jackson mentored me and helped me understand, how to treat women, how to talk to people, how to not be angry, and how to express my feelings in terms of of what that looked like. He showed me what that looked like. He helped me understand what that looked like. And then moving forward from there, and Dr. Moody Jackson saw me off to college and then coached me for a year at Northern Arizona while he was working on his doctorate at the time. So at that point in time, he leaves Northern Arizona. He came back to Phoenix, actually became an administrator, then and a superintendent in public schools, but he actually gave me my first job, okay, as a teacher, a history teacher, and has since mentored me for as long as I can remember. So Dr. Moody Jackson is probably the man who's probably poured into my life as much as anybody.
Okay, thank you.
I've been blessed to have had a lot of really good coaches and teachers, and I remember a lot of them. But I think the one that's probably been most influential and inspiring to me is the gentleman who actually recruited me to the University of Memphis. And so I played for him there. His name's Bob Stevenson, by the way. I later worked for him at Christian Brothers University, and that was a long time ago, obviously. But there has not been probably a week, maybe 2 weeks that have gone by since that time that I haven't spoken to him. And much of that is because he stayed in touch with me. And that's been very inspiring. And I don't know that he was the best coach that I ever had. He was good, but he was a tremendous example. He was a good coach. He was a tremendous leader. He was a good husband. He was a good father. So he was a great example for me. And even to this day, I find myself in situations where I just automatically think, what would Bob do? So that's been really helpful to me.
Yeah, very insightful. I appreciate you all. What stood out for you, if anything, from the talk we just had that I just shared with the men? And I guess I can ask, it's two questions in one. What stood out for you, as well as what do you see as some of the greatest challenges facing our young men today? So what stood out from you from the talk, if anything, if one thing that stood out for you, along with what do you see as some of the greatest challenges for our young men today?
What stood out to me was what type of life would you have when no one's calling the plays? And I looked at that as saying, do the right thing when no one's looking. And I think that's the biggest challenge our young men have today, doing the right thing when no one's there telling them to do the right thing. It's hard for them to do that, when no one's there. And I think that's the hardest part for our kids, these young men today, is doing the right thing when no one's looking.
Well, just in going back to the beginning of what you talked about, just in the younger stages, I think really I'm going to put this into words, but really just young people are very impressionable. So when we talk to young people, and you have to realize they're a blank slate. So everything that you say gets written on that blackboard. It gets written, and then as they get older, that space gets filled. So, as you start to fill that space with these ideas, those ideas as they grow start to become cemented. And that cementing process makes it really tough for now, leading forward to what you talk about, some of the issues that we see today. So, some of the issues that, I commonly see with our young guys is that they really have a hard time. They really have a hard time understanding, the consequences of their actions. Okay, they're fearless in terms of how they approach, this process of being a man. And that process is somewhat scary because some of their ideas of what men do and what men are, can lead us down a very scary path.
You know, in my 22 years as a college football coach and in my 7, 8 years as a high school coach, I've always questioned whether our young men really did understand or they really didn't understand. And it was always puzzling to me, even today. I know it was mentioned that the sagging of the pants, Bernard mentioned that. I still don't understand why we as a society can't stop that. Why that our young men have such a low self-esteem of themselves that they have to sag these pants. And if we allow the women to sag their pants, then they would be arrested for lewdness. But we as men get along with it. I think the consequences are not there for our actions anymore. I don't think we hold our kids responsible. But now you got to remember, I come from the old school. And it's very hard for me to understand why we consistently put up with athletes abusing females, why we continue to use the excuse of we're going to let the system play out before we make a decision on what we're going to do with them. We all, as coaches, always knew whether our young man has abused a female or not. We knew that. And why are we going to wait until it plays out through the system when the young girl will end up not prosecuting? That's always puzzled the heck out of me, why we do that. I was very fortunate. I had very little of that when I coached, mainly because we only had one rule. If you're not fast enough to outrun the female, then you're not good enough to play for us. And that was the rule. If you put your hands on a female, you would never play for us. And so a couple tried it, a couple of them had to be dismissed. We didn't wait on the court system to rule on it. So we had very few problems with that. And even today, as I read in the paper, I see it on TV, I get so disgusted with this situation. But we're so liberal today with our actions. Something has to be done. And I certainly appreciate this program, and I hope we can grow it until we get it stopped. Because understand, I got a wife and 3 daughters and a female dog. And I don't want anybody putting their hands on any of them, particularly males.
I don't know how to follow that. I see a lack of patience. People, and I see this in my own house, people want it, and they want it now. And that's concerning to me. See an inability or an unwillingness to stick things out, you know, and I think we as parents sometimes bail our young people out, and we enable them in some ways and keep them from doing that. I'm very concerned about that.
You know, I appreciate that. I want to maybe stay or go where Boots was just at. So the question was, what are some of the challenges for our young men today? How about let's think about and discuss what are the challenges for us as older men? If we believe in this conversation that we're having that this is about us as men, if you're with me on this here, that, you know, Derek mentioned that our boys come to us as an empty slate. You know, we pour into them. So if we believe that on certain levels, some level, this is more about us as men than it is about them. As Boots gave a few examples of, you know, of the why don't we's, you know. If this is more about us than them, if we don't stop this, if we allow this, What's going on? What do you see that's happening with us as older men? If this is our responsibility, what's going on with us as older men that's creating this environment that we're speaking to, these challenges with our younger men?
I'm not as old as some of my guys on this panel. Yeah, I'll probably have to say communicating with the younger youth. That's one thing I feel like is a challenge for me, just to speak on certain things that goes on with our younger men. And if I can become a better communicator, I think I can, help more kids around the city.
I'll apologize for his youth. I think the biggest problem we have right now is education. If you look at our system, and I think the police chief, Don Aaron, if they're up there somewhere, will tell you, somewhere around 80% of everyone that's incarcerated, they read it on a 5th grade level. Therefore, they're not capable of making very many sound decisions as they get older. And I think education is a major player. Unfortunately, due to our lack of discipline in our society today, the students of our high schools and our middle schools basically come and go and do what they want because they're backed by their parents, also read, possibly on a 5th grade level, and demand from the school system that their kids do this or their kids have a right to do that. And therefore, we get ourselves in a pickle that we don't know what to do. Me, I prefer, very simple, and I don't want to be a preacher here, but I think principals should run their own schools and not the superintendent. I think they should be required. You run your school, you run it the way you want to. If you want to put school uniforms in or whatever it may be, you do that. All we want to know is your kids are going to be able to be educated and read on the class level as they go up. Because once they get into the 9th, 10th grade and they find out they're reading on the 3rd, 4th, 5th grade level, they have no choice. They have to drop out of school because everybody starts making fun of them. And when they drop out of school, then they get on the street corner and then they start carrying the guns or whatever it may be. And we all turn back around and say, what happened? Well, it's very simple. A kid has to feel good about themselves. And usually they'll do that when they're making A's and B's. They don't feel good about themselves when they're making D's and F's.
So many things are happening in our young people's lives at all levels, and I'm going to piggyback with Delanie a little bit, but I'm going to take it a little step further. I'm going to say intentional communication, because here's the problem. Sometimes we talk to our kids and we're shallow. We keep our conversations on the surface. Okay, so we say hello, and we see a young person in distress. Okay, and we keep it moving, because there's always the next thing that we have to get to. Okay, but what I've had to do with my coaches, okay, is talk to them every day about having intentional conversations, and these intentional conversations have led to some interesting conversations about what's going on in their lives. When they know that you're invested in what's happening with them, and you really care, then that's when the work really starts to begin. That's when the door really starts to crack open, and we can start to get to some of the underlying issues with our young people.
Okay. Well said.
I think I would agree with Coach. I have to really work at staying in touch with what's going on. And I do that by staying in touch with my coaches. And they can explain to me some of the jargon, some of the things that are really going on out there, that I might, and you might not either, Boots. Don't look at me like that. Might not understand. So, and he's right. I think that, you have to really hit that nerve with them and be able to talk about things that are really meaningful and, before you really get their attention.
I appreciate what you men have shared. At a Call of Men, we talk a lot about, as men, developing our voice. Because a lot, when you talk about communication, whether it's lack of communication, intentional communication, Coach, you're talking about how to stay in touch, to have the ability to communicate. It's like developing a voice, you know, to allow us to be present with our young men, with boys, you know, and to talk about stuff that older men didn't talk about with us, you know. So we haven't had the opportunity to practice, you know. So it might be an issue around objectifying women. We might know simply that that's wrong, don't do it. But in many cases, we don't have the language to really break it down and help them to understand the ramifications of it, help them to understand the slippery slope. Not just a slippery slope or you're going to get in trouble, but how it impacts society. You know, to really have critical conversations with our young men, a lot of times we don't have the voice. And it's unfortunate because older men, in many respects, didn't have that voice to share with us. And so it's really time for us as men to develop a voice, you know, to pour into our young men. And so I appreciate that. We're coming to a close with the panel here, so I just have one last question for you as men. I appreciate you to share in a real purposeful way with the men that are here. You know, what would you suggest or request? Because I'm down with the urgency of now. I'm down with filling the gap. I don't put too much effort into asking men or suggesting, to tell you the truth. I'm more of saying this is what we got to do. You say it however you want to say it. But what do you suggest or request of the men present here today as it relates to our conversation? What do you suggest or request of the men present here today? Those are, and this would be your last comment.
Well, I said intentional communication, but really, you know, for us, it's intentional actions. Just in terms of what we do, you know, man, be who we say we are. You know, let's make sure that really, you know, man, for our young people, we can model, because what you do speaks so loudly, they don't hear what you say. I'll say it one more time. What you do speaks so loudly, they don't hear what you say. They look at you, they look at how you act, they look at, you know, how you carry yourself, okay, and what your message is, and to see if that message is consistent, you know, with your life, with how you treat people, you know, your interaction with the team. Is it fair? Because we talk about fairness, and to kids nowadays, young people nowadays, they're always comparing and contrasting, you know, man, what it looks like. And, you know, but we have to be as consistent, you know, as we can be. And then when they don't understand, tell them why. That's a problem nowadays with adults to a certain degree, because for me, it was hard. My mom used to talk to me and explain to me why. She helped me understand the whys, because then she held me responsible for understanding, okay, exactly what I was doing. So, I mean, I understood, you know, what she meant when those consequences came down. A lot of our young people don't know why. And when they ask you why, we can't be offended. Okay, man, we just have to be able to speak to them, be intentional about our actions, and I truly believe in the end we can find progress.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Coach.
I think this is basically, you know, almost kind of piggybacking what Coach just said. Lead by example. If you're teaching something, make sure that you're doing the same thing that you're teaching. Don't say one thing and do another. Make sure that person see you doing the same exact thing. If you're saying be kind to women, make sure you're doing the same thing in your household. Don't tell someone to do something if you ain't doing the same thing. And that's what I tell these young men around these high schools that I go speak to, these elementaries. When I tell them, I'll make sure I'm doing it so they can see me doing it. I'm leading by example. I don't want to be the guy that tells somebody something and then I just go home and I get in an argument with my girlfriend, I call out her names. I'm making sure I'm doing what I'm preaching. And I think that's the biggest thing we need to do as men, is lead by example.
You know, we keep hearing the word consistency, and I'd like to go a little bit further. I think you have to be completely honest with yourself. It's what you believe in. It's not what I would believe in, and I'm speaking primarily now as the coaches. If you as a coach believe a certain way, you have to stay with that. You cannot flip-flop because you cannot fool these young men in this day and time. If what you believe in, you have to stay with. And I don't think that's real difficult. I think you have to soul search and find out what you really and truly believe, and you have to stay with that. And if you do that, then the kids will understand it, the kids will get to know you, and they will trust you. In this day and time, our kids, you have to go a heck of a lot further in this day and time to get players to believe in you and to believe in what you believe in, as opposed to where it used to be when we were my age. Nobody in here, I don't think, is my age, but back in those days, they just told you what to do, and you just said yes or no, sir, 3 bags full, and you did that. But today, you do have to explain why you believe what you believe. And if you can stick with that and be consistent, regardless of whether you're 0-11, 0-12, or 12-0, you do not change, then I think your players will always believe in you.
Thank you. Yes, Coach.
A number of years ago, I got the dreaded call as athletic director and as a coach, and the voice on the other end of the phone said, "Coach, there's been an incident, and there's an alleged sexual assault, and it involves student athletes." And you experience a number of things, disappointment, fear, anger. I was mad at everybody. But what another thing I distinctly remember thinking is, what could I have done that this might not have happened? And since that time, I've done better, and we're all obviously trying to do better because we're here today. But as you said, it goes way beyond the X's and O's, and I think we have to act in response to your question.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. Really appreciate you. Appreciate you taking your time to pour into me and to pour into the other men. You want to give a round of applause to the men here? I'm going to ask Mr. Williams to join me here. We're going to just take a few minutes and have a chat, a one-on-one chat here in your presence. How you doing, sir? All right. Nice little rug there and everything. A bottle of water for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Like we're in the living room, getting ready to watch the game or something.
A lot of people in our living room.
Yeah, there is, I know. You've been around athletics how many years? You know, outside of you playing, but you know, in the capacity of a coach or AD.
Well, you know, as Paul stated, when I left college and went back home to Detroit, I was a public school teacher and a coach. So I did that until I went off to law school, practiced law for a while, and then I ended up Ohio State. And I was a professor and then an administrator. And for the last 7 years that I was administrator at Ohio State, the athletic department actually reported to me. The AD reported to me, and then down here. So I would say, if you think of all of that, I mean, most of my life has had something to do with athletics. I can't really think of a time when there wasn't some aspect of it, even practicing law. One of our biggest clients was the owner of the Detroit Pistons. So.
I got you. So you've been around men in, when we talk to men, we like to spend time with athletes, law enforcement, military men, faith leaders. We know that these are the men that men look up to. And when these men get on board, we can expedite some of this stuff that us laymen don't have the ability to do. they can turn what's, not popular into something very popular very quick. We talk with, pro athletes like Delanie and other men that have these camps, where they got 500 boys, use that camp time, man, to do some of this work. So we talked a lot about that. I got a question for you, maybe different from some of the questions we've had, because this is, it's not just a bottom up, meaning boys developing character. It's also a top down experience also, because we are the men, that have that charge. What has been your experience or your thoughts about how we as men confront each other? The joke at the water cooler, the comments in the locker room, the assistant coaches, and you're trying to do something as a head coach, and, just how to, could be your brother-in-law, whoever, you know what I mean? What's your thoughts about how we as men be with each other? Because it's not just about educating our boys, it's about the re-education process for us as men as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, and it's something that we need to be clear about, and we need to not send a confusing message. And some of it is similar to what just was said. You can't be one way in one environment and different in another. If you're going to be with the guys, and being with the guys is going to send a certain message or reinforce some of the negative messages, you're not going to change that. I mean, you may think you can change it. You may think you have control over it, but that's going to filter out into how you deal with everybody. The other thing is, just because me and Derek might be in the building by ourselves saying something, that doesn't mean other people aren't observing it. This whole thing of how we conduct ourselves, people are watching. People see what you're doing, even when you don't think they do. They hear what you're saying. Those things get back to them. So I think that is a real big problem. And then the other problem is, we tend to have this sort of way in which we got to be, the word you have, we got to man up with our boy. We got to be,
right.
We got to be the dude. And we got to be this and that. And that sends a message to these kids. And, it's very interesting. You had a panel here, and at least 3 of the 4 basically grew up in a single-family home. How do you have to deal with that? I mean, there is an involvement both from coaches and other men, and how do you fill that gap? Well, that gap is going to hopefully be filled by people seeing how men interact with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excuse me.
So, was there any particular thing in that in our talk? You watched me talk and engage with the men in the audience. Anything stand out for you in particular?
The thing that stood out for me was this whole concept of this whole variety of men. Excuse me. I did grow up in a family where my dad was there. And my dad was an ex-military guy. And so I grew up with a dad who was not a coach per se, but I had that involvement too. But the most important thing I take from that is my dad was a dad to people who didn't have dads. Mm-hmm. My dad's brother died very young, and my uncle had 4 kids. Well, my dad was a dad to them.
Right.
My dad became a school teacher. He was a dad to the people that he was students to.
Right.
I had uncles. I look at my father-in-law. My father-in-law, who had 5 kids, he was a bus driver. My mother-in-law didn't work, and he raised them. Those are the models that you look at and basically say, there are these things that are done the right way, send the right message. That's who we need to emulate.
Right.
Not the other signals that come out. The other thing that really came out to me is, I don't know if my SWA, Candace, I don't know if Candace is still here, but Candace and I spent a lot of times end up having to talk to some of our student athletes who have done something wrong. And it's very interesting, as I was listening to this, I thought back to, we've had a number of times over the periods of time I've been here where I might have a young man, one of our student athletes in our office with Candace and I, and he's done something, and then sometime, many too often this time as it relates to something that he's said or done vis-a-vis a woman. And it always interests me after our conversations, Candace will say, now give me a hug. And they'll hug. And I never do.
Oh, that's interesting.
I never do. So what message am I sending now? What message am I saying to that young man that as a man you don't do? And and I thought about it, and I even thought about it this weekend, sort of in a different way, because we went to visit my son who's a freshman in college. And as we were getting ready to leave High Point, and we're in the parking lot, and it's a big weekend at High Point, students all over the place. I really worried, would my son hug me when we left in public? And it brought tears to my eyes that he did.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the way you're giving with me and with the men here is the way we ask men to give, because this is what moves men, that, to be real. And so I'm going to ask you to, if we just stay there for a minute, you're speaking about the expression of love, right?
Yes.
Of affection, right? Expression. So if we go back, 'cause I always love when I see a man hug his son, kiss him on the forehead, stuff like that, and don't care who's watching, that they're just together and this is just about them. And you talked about how you're realizing, and it's going to be very impactful for you because you had that eye-opener here. So when you're with Candace in that situation again, it's going to be front and center on your mind. You already know that, how you're going to respond when she does that in the end. How do you feel that this inability for us as men to really share emotions, what do you see as the impact on us in the broader scope? The challenges we have with being emotionally present?
Well, I think it contributes to the problem that we have. I mean, it's, as I said earlier, for me, I have to, in order to understand things, I have to break them down to real simple stuff. If it's too complex for me, I'm not going to understand it. So I have to break it down to simple. And one of the simple things, if we aren't able to break through and actually show some sort of feelings towards each other, we can't expect those people to show feelings, the right sort of feelings to other people. I mean, this whole concept, and I hadn't thought of it, and I'm not sure, it might have been Bernard who said it, might have been Paul, but we got to first have respect for ourselves. And if you don't have respect for yourself, how can you have respect for anybody else? And my failure at a point in time when that kid is in my office, and what that kid needs is to know that there's love. And for my SWA, a woman to hug him, he expects that.
Right.
It's okay for them. And it's interesting, it's only 3 of us in the office. But for me to basically say, all right, man, I dap you.
Yeah.
Go get it, dude. It's like we miss another chance of basically saying, man, you can have love for people.
Right.
You can have love for me, and I can have love for you.
Right.
And now go take that love and have love for everybody else.
Right. Just even using the word love, a man saying he loves another man.
Absolutely.
All of that, it trips us up and it's holding us back. So these notions of manhood that we're talking about here, we're speaking about how it's holding us hostage as men.
Yeah, and the other piece in there, that man box you had, and the discussion about the girl, seeing your son with the girls and sending that message, well, are you gay? And my family, which I considered my family to be the strength of how I got here, if there was a time in my family that I thought my family let something down, is I had my first cousin who I grew up with, who we realized he was gay. And the way in which the family failed to love him sent him away. It sent him away. And his whole life after that and his passing, only at his funeral did the family decide it was now time to show him love. And that sort of put a crack through the family. I mean, and that's the thing, that, I hadn't thought about it before you put it in the box. But, and brought that example in there. So, to my sons, I have 2 sons, you're my sons. I don't care if you're gay or what. You're my sons, and I need to teach you to be a man in that aspect too. I need to show you how to be a man in that aspect. So, I mean, I guess I would say to all of the women in the audience, I apologize, not because I have offended directly, but I haven't done all I should have done and could have done to make life better for you all. And for that, I apologize, and I pledge to do better.
Yeah. And with that, as we come to a close in our time together, what would you like to, the same question I posed to the men at the panel, what would you like to suggest or request from the men present here, as they leave here, go about their business, and time they spend with boys and young men, be it in athletics or otherwise, what would you like to request of them that they begin to do what?
Well, I think first be deliberate. I mean, I think all of the panel said be intentional, communicate, but be deliberate with that. Don't let it be, well, I might have. Be deliberate. Be deliberate in your message. Be deliberate in your conversations. Address the issues as they're there. And I just think that we spend so much time trying to send a message, trying to send a message around a corner. And messages don't go around corners. They go straight. And you just have to be deliberate about that. And you don't need to apologize for that. You don't need to say, I'm sorry about that. And we need to be very upfront about, as I said, Derek says the word, be the right dude. Well, let's make sure they understand what being the right dude means. And we need to show that, and we need to talk about that, and we need to reinforce it and reinforce it and reinforce it. This cannot end at 11:30 today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, sir. God bless you.
God bless you.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Tony. I've known Chris Sanders since 1996. We both worked together in Houston. His teammates call him Tip because he always walked on his tiptoes. I don't know if he's still doing that. I've got a 4-year-old in my house. We're trying to teach him that the heel is actually a part of the foot, so he doesn't. He is, I presume he still is. Last time I saw him play something, he was playing a mean outfield in a charity softball game, a wonderful athlete, but he's also an incredible father and mentor. It's great to see him settle in here at MBA, and it's only fitting, we think, that he shares some reflections here as we wind down our program. Chris Sanders.
Stop looking at my toes. I saw y'all watching me when I walked. I was going to kind of share a whole bunch of notes and kind of stuff that they wanted me to say, but I'm going to kind of say something that's kind of personal from my heart. I remember, we were talking about domestic violence and the statistics, and my sister is a statistic of domestic violence. I remember coming home in 8th grade, smiling and laughing, and I go in the house and I hear some screaming, and it's her boyfriend beating her in the corner. And as a young kid, my hormones is going crazy, and I put my fist up and I want to fight him. And I'm screaming back and forth, and he's yelling like, what are you going to do? And I scream at him like, what are you going to do? You don't know how to treat a woman. And he said these words, and I'll never forget. He said, nobody ever taught me. Nobody ever taught this man how to love. Nobody ever taught this man how to treat a woman. The reason why he was treating my sister bad is because nobody sat and taught him how to treat a woman. I remember one time, not one time, but I remember when I went to go sign up to play Little League football. And the first thing they did is they put me with a receiver coach. And the reason why they put me with a receiver coach is because the receiver coach was going to teach me the fundamentals of how to play the game when I'm in the game. And I thought to myself, if that coach wasn't there and I get in the game, I wouldn't know what to do. And that's the same thing why our youth is losing today, or our men are losing today, is because they don't have a coach to teach them the fundamentals of how to win in life. That's why we're losing. That's why they're acting silly. That's why they're acting crazy, is because nobody is teaching them the fundamentals of how to treat a woman. And this is my last story. I know I have to say a lot of stories, but this is my last story. I remember we were in Super Bowl 34, and we were all huddled up. It was me, Kevin Dice, and Frank Wycheck, and it's the last play. It's the last play of the game. This is it. And as we're out there, I'm to the left. I run to the left. Kevin Dyson goes to the right, and basically I'm saying, don't throw me the ball because I don't want to be on ESPN and say that's the reason why we lost. So that situation happens. Kevin Dyson goes out there. They throw the ball, and he comes up a yard short, and we lose. And that's exactly what our men, our athletes or men happening today, is they're coming up a yard short. And the reason why they're coming up a yard short is because they're huddled up with the wrong man. They need to huddle up with coaches that's going to encourage them. They need to huddle up with men that's going to teach them the fundamentals of not just being a great football player, not running that great route, but being the fundamentals of how to treat a woman. See, the reason why they're doing these things is because they're huddled up with the wrong things. They're huddled up with BET. They're huddled up with, I'm trying not to get my preacher, it's coming out a little bit. But they're huddled up with MTV. They're huddled up with VH1 and all this crazy stuff, and they're acting out what they see. But if they're around their coaches and they see the way they treat women, then they're going to follow suit. So here's my pledge to all the coaches. Don't just teach them the fundamentals of being a great athlete. Teach them the fundamentals of being a great man. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Please welcome Peter McDonald. He's a retired district judge from Kentucky, a YWCA board member. He's co-chairing this important effort for the YW, and you could say he's made a second career out of engaging men in the effort to reduce violence against women. Peter McDonald.
Thank you all. Pat just gave me a message a moment ago, said I've got to be like the Energizer Bunny, but I'm going to have to say I've got a couple of things I've got to say, Pat. First of all is to thank everyone for being here, and to thank Tony for being here, and for Paul being our MC, and for the panel, and all these men who have spoken. You're not going to have too many chances where you hear men open up like this, like they've done today. So take this to heart, what they've said, because these are important messages. The staff and volunteers of the YW have been incredible. I know this is a conversation that I started with Pat, or Pat started with me, I should say, about almost 3 years ago. The first time I'd ever heard about engaging men or working with men in domestic violence was almost 13 years ago. That was when I was going around the world looking at domestic violence in the military, and I heard from Jackson Katz, who said, well, the answer is not to deal with the aftermath, but is to prevent domestic violence, which is an obvious statement. If women could have solved violence against women, it would have been solved a long time ago. That's why men must take this job, so to speak. What everyone has said, we've got to do something. It can't end at 11:30 this morning, like David Williams says. It has to go on. And I want to say that everyone here, it seems like, has said that all the men here are good men. But really being a good man means more than simply saying, I'm not a rapist or I'm not an abuser. You've got to do something from this point on to make sure that our young men grow up so that they do value and respect women. We have to do that. If we don't, our society will never change. And I've got a vested interest, just like all of you do who have wives and daughters and girlfriends and everything else. My wife lives here. We've been married 42 years. Our older son and his wife are here. But what is most important to me is my 8-year-old grandson and 4-year-old granddaughter live here. And I want to make sure that my grandson grows up to value and respect women, and I want to make sure that my granddaughter grows up to be safe, valued, and respected. So, that said, it's time for you all to take some action now. We've been working on this for several years, as I said. There are things that you've done. If you've not yet filled out the pre-test, post-test, please do that. That's extremely important to us. Also, take to heart what everyone here has said, and also take to heart what I just said a minute ago. Being a good man is more than simply saying, I'm not a rapist or I'm not an abuser. Fill this out and say what you'll do. Give us your organization, what you can do for us, because we're going to have another one of these a year from now. And we want to show the tremendous progress that coaches have made in Nashville and Davidson County. If you don't feel comfortable about what you're doing, there are some things you've gotten. You've got 10 points of what you can do from a call to men. You've gotten a flash drive. Put it in your computer. There's some valuable things there, especially for youth coaches. Look at those. And if you're really uncomfortable, call the YWCA. We will coach you through this, what to do. We'll give you the tools so that you feel comfortable in dealing with your athletes. We want to thank all our sponsors, Vanderbilt University, the YWCA course. I'm a board member. So men are allowed on the board of the YWCA. It's not just young women. It's also old men like me. And I think Boots said he's getting older. I'm not sure he's older or I'm older, but I was a judge for 25 years dealing with the aftermath of domestic violence. I've been retired for almost 12, and I've been focusing my entire life on ending violence against women. But it's always been about the aftermath. This is a way to change a tremendous culture shift, and Nashville can be the safest place in the United States for women and children. I'm convinced of that. I know that Pat Shea and the YWCA is convinced of that. I know that Chief Anderson is convinced of that. I know that everyone in this room, the panelists are convinced of that. So why don't we just go ahead and do something? And just do it. And if you want to check with us again, please do so. The sponsors also include the OVC, which is wonderful that they've done it, and particular thanks to Verizon. Verizon has been with us for a number of years and has been a major sponsor for everything that we have done. So there is a gentleman here from Verizon who you all need to thank, and I have his card, but I want to make sure I got his first name right. Rick Summers is here from Verizon. Rick, again, thank you so much for all you've done. So as you leave, the staff members here will take up your cards as to what you're going to be doing. We'll be contacting you within a year, and we want to find out some really innovative things that you've done so we can try them out not only on more coaches, but even on the ones who are in this room today. Thank you so much for being here.
So just before you leave, I just want to say thank you also. I had a couple of slides there. I wanted to thank all the presenters. That's the names of all the men that have come before you. I want to thank them all. Like Peter, I want to thank all the members of the planning team. It takes a while to put an event like this here together. I want to thank them for their participation and all of the sponsors that have been involved in this event as well. I want to thank them. And we have many, many volunteers, many volunteers. And I want to also share some love with them. And so just in closing, I'm just really encouraging the men here. I want to thank the women for the way you be with us, you know, the way you can just be with us, you know, and love us through the process and stay by our side and love us through the process. I just want to thank the women. I want to ask the men in the room to give the women in the room a round of applause, please. And so, as Peter said, the Y, under the leadership of Pat Shea, is going to be doing a lot of work, following up on what we're doing here. This is an ongoing effort. It's not a one-time thing. I want to ask you to really stay in touch with them, stay close. If you're not linked up with them, to do that so you can be involved in other efforts. I've been to your city now several times, your great city, and I've been having just a blessed time meeting a lot of people. Looking forward to continuing being a part of your efforts. It's really time for us as men to stand up and speak out. And I'm going to say it clear. We didn't say this clear in the beginning. But the truth of the matter is, if we're not part of the solution, we are part of the problem. There's no place in the middle. There's no gray area to kind of hang out and chill, right? So we're either part of the solution or we're part of the problem. And I know in our hearts we all want to be part of the solution. So stand up, speak out, find your voice, get a voice, know your voice counts, and join us in these efforts to not only end men's violence against women, but to really to support the hope, the healing, and the holisticness of us as men. Thank you for coming out. We really love you and appreciate you.
Thank